was 16 years old, when I got my first copy of the Book of Enoch at Barnes and Noble, and I was reading it. I remember reading it, sitting there in Barnes and Noble reading this, or rather, I think it was actually in Borders. And I was just my heart was pierced when I read in the parables that the righteous and the elect, and this is what I saw in my head, hang upon the Lord of the spirits. Yeah. That phraseology is just absolutely mind-blowing to me, because here you have a prefiguration of the crucifixion of Christ and the notion, which becomes a New Testament doctrine, that we are what? Crucified with Christ. No. We hang upon the Lord of spirits through Christ, that it is his crucifixion, it is that it is the Son of Man who is going to redeem us, and that the righteous, that he would be a staff to the righteous, that it would be through him that we have access to the Father, that he would redeem us and reconcile us to the Father. These are, if you're just reading the Old Testament, yes, you can derive that from, there are certainly many messianic allusions in the Old Testament that that the Messiah is going to save his people from their sins. Yes. And many allusions to the crucifixion. There's a handful of allusions in the Old Testament that are quite specific, right, to the crucifixion. But some of these New Testament documents are nowhere fleshed out in the Old Testament like they are in the Book of Enoch. And that's why certain scholars who want to debate, there are certain scholars, although the majority of scholars, there's no debate that the Book of Enoch, the earliest portions of the Book of the Watchers, the Book of Parables, predate the birth of Christ. There are some scholars who are holding out. Why are they holding out? Because they simply cannot believe that these things were written of Christ before he was born. And they simply cannot believe that the apostles, that the writers of the New Testament were drawing upon the Book of Enoch in the formulation of their doctrines. They have to put the Book of Enoch contemporary with them, or even posterior to them, to the apostles and the writings of the New Testament. And it's because it is so synchronistic with the New Testament. Indeed, anyone familiar with the New Testament, when you read the Book of Enoch, I'm going to venture that some of you are going to be reading it with tears in your eyes, because you will be seeing these explicit prophecies, the oracles of Enoch, that are predicting the advent, the birth of Christ, the birth and death and resurrection of Christ in a way that is just tremendous. And as I said, so concise and so prescient. And then you're going to see the doctrines of the New Testament when you see them in the context of the Book of the Watchers and the parables. The New Testament, it's like it adds so much contrast and color to what the New Testament writers are saying, because you're realizing where they're deriving so much of this from, and why the Son of Man, why when Jesus walked around and throughout Judea calling himself the Son of Man, why that title was so important to the Jews and why it offended the Pharisees and Sadducees. You cannot explain why Jesus referred to himself as the Son of Man. You cannot explain why that was his preferred title if you are only drawing on the canonized Old Testament. But if you take the Book of Enoch and you understand who this Son of Man is predicted to be, what he represents, then you realize why they had to crucify him.
Tim, how much do you think that the Book of Enoch, it's like these, you're given all the clues, but you have no idea how the story is going to play out. You know, it's like a choppy movie. Can't really see it all. But I don't know if I have a question as much as I'm just trying to think, like, do you think that the Book of Enoch is just too much information and it gives too much clarity and it's rejected because people kind of they like a faith that's confusing. They like to debate it. They don't really want to know. Well, here's an answer for you. Here's kind of a black and white answer for you. And we sort of reject those things.
The Book of Enoch certainly, and I don't know if this answers your question, but the Book of Enoch certainly informs the Christology of the New Testament in a way that the Old Testament does not, or at least it's certainly an expansion on the Old Testament, or the writings of the Old Testament. I would say that the prophecies of the Old Testament are actually an expansion on the Enochian manuscript, the Enochian text, which predate them. As I said earlier, that vision of Daniel, the vision of Daniel of the Ancient of Days, ancient or head of days, is synchronistic with Enoch's vision of the ancient or head of days. And the one I read was just one of a handful of them in the parables. Very detailed. So when Jesus comes on the scene, it's a very interesting question. How much did his adversaries, and when I say his adversaries, I'm not just referring to the Pharisees and Sadducees. I'm referring to the devil and his angels. How much did his adversaries realize, recognize? They knew who he was. There's no question about it. The Gadarene demoniacs who came running at Jesus, threw themselves at his feet and said, "What have you to do with us, oh you Son of God?" They knew who he was. They recognized exactly who he was. Why have you come to torment us before the appointed time? By the way, referencing the Gadarene demoniacs, that question that they asked Jesus when they see him on the shore of Galilee in the land of Gadarene, when they see him, they recognize him as the Son of God. But who do they know the Son of God to be according to the Scriptures? They know that the Son of God is the judge who is going to judge not only mankind, but the angels and the Nephilim, their offspring. Because the Nephilim and the angels that are condemned and are in chains in the abyss or Tartarus, they are awaiting the day of judgment. And that day of judgment is yet to come. And there is one who is going to preside over that day of judgment. And that one is who the Book of Enoch designates as the righteous one, the elect one, that Son of Man, who is the Son of God. And so even the title Son of Man is a prefiguration, is predictive of the incarnation of Jesus Christ, who would be born through Mary, be born into our condition as a human being. The very title Son of Man, because Enoch makes it clear that this Son of Man is also the Son of God. And so that in and of itself is in a remarkable prophecy regarding the incarnation of Christ being born into the human condition. But these demons, they recognize that the Son of Man is here. What is he doing here before the appointed time? They didn't realize that Jesus would come twice. See, they knew he would come at the end of the age, at the day of the Lord, to execute judgment. They knew that, and they knew that that was him. Why is the great judge walking on the earth before the appointed day of judgment? Now, if you're just referencing the Old Testament, when you encounter this story in the New Testament of the Gadarene demoniacs, you don't have the context of, number one, who these demons are, where they come from, and number two, why they would ask Jesus this question. Why have you come to torment us before the appointed time? The only way you're going to understand this dynamic, the only way, is if you read the Book of Enoch.